G'day everyone, and yes, I am from Sydney, so let's get out the Aussie jokes now and then you can be kind to me, thank you. The way I see it, there's two main reasons why people attend conferences such as these. The first is to get the opportunity to hang out and meet some like-minded people away from the office. And the second is to leave a little bit smarter, feeling like we've left a little bit smarter at the end of the conference than we first walked in. So it's definitely clear by the energy of the room that we can tick off number one, but just in case we can't, let's just turn to the person next to us. It is getting near that lunchtime break, so just turn to the person next to us, give them a little gentle tug on the shoulders and say, wakey, wakey. Say, wakey, wakey, give them a little gentle. And say, I'm going to be your conference buddy for the rest of the day. This is your conference buddy. And whether you like it or not, you are going to be the best damn conference buddy that you've ever been. So we can tick off number one. Let's just spend a minute or so sharing a couple of interesting yet pretty useless facts so we can tick off number two straight away. Did you know that it's impossible to lick your elbow? Did you know that? And did you know that it's impossible to sneeze and keep your eyes open? And that when you sneeze, it travels at 160 kilometres an hour. Think about that next time your team's got a cold, right? And more importantly, did you know that 75% of audiences will, in fact, attempt to lick their elbow? In fact, this gentleman down here is about to try to prove me wrong right now. And you know how these things can drive you a little bit insane, not knowing whether you can or can't lick your elbow. There's been always three things that have driven me a bit crazy in modern organisations. And yes, I got on my high horse a couple of years ago and I labelled those three things: bullies, blamers and bludgers. And unfortunately, they're alive and thriving in modern organisations. And you combine them together, and what I call them is the drag factor, because they are absolutely dragging down our ability to be productive, innovative, and ultimately to perform. And now, there's absolutely no question that the focus, particularly from a people perspective, has been on employee engagement, hasn't it, for the last 10, 15 years. And I kind of think this focus has led us off course a little bit. And as Jez said, I've spent the majority of my career in senior HR roles for some really huge organisations. But what I mean is this: the focus on engagement has led us off course, because what I've seen is that it's led to a bit of a rise in the entitlement culture, where people are all around, well, what are you going to give for me, versus focusing on the important role that they play in the business. Now look, I was having a chat with my husband, Muzz, the other day about this exact thing. And I said to him, Muzz, sex is not always the answer, And to my surprise, he actually said, no, honey, you're right. Sex is the question. Yes, it's the answer. Entitlement. Now, he likes to say that we just have different perspectives on this stuff. So what I'd like to do is bring a different perspective, and that's around really joining together and shifting some of that responsibility back to the individual employees. And it's through really leadership is upside down and giving them that entitlement to lead themselves. And it's through what I call a notion of creating ownership. See, whether you are the leader of one, a leader of 10, 20, 30, the fact is your people are the biggest untapped resource, aren't they, in our ever-decreasing budgets? So our ability is to lead ourselves, first of all, and lead your teams in an inspiring but an open and a frank way, gives us the ability to have our teams change the game for us. And I don't know about you, but one of the big questions we always get asked in business is, how do we make businesses better in these tough circumstances? And I reckon you don't. You make the people better. See, strategy gets better when executives and the leaders who are making those decisions get better. Sales get better when the sales people get better. Service gets better when the people serving the customers get better, yeah? Same kind of works at home, right? Kids get better when parents get better, husbands get better, wives get better when, well, actually, we don't need to get better, but you get the point, right? So what we do, we work with organisations to get the people part better by turning up that level of ownership and that notion of that they actually lead, yeah. Now, rant number one, bear with me. Bullies kill business and they can kill people. Yeah, what a bully does, they come in and they take away your power. They come in and because they feel insignificant and insecure, they belittle you in front of your mates, they take the credit for your hard work. Anyone seen this movie? Show of hands, who's seen this movie? It's an oldie but a goodie. Yeah, we're going back probably a decade or so now. I mean, how can we forget Devil Wears Prada? We've got Meryl Streep here, plays the epitome of the bully boss. She has her little assistant here, whose name escapes me. Thank you very much. And he's running around the whole of New York City doing crazy things, being at the beck and call. Now, here's the thing, guys, spoiler alert, so if you're going to get this one out, I'm about to ruin the ending. It's not until the end of this movie when the target of the bullying actually faces up to her bully boss that, that things can change. And that's the whole thing with these behaviours. It's not until we face up to them that we can actually make any change. Now, this, of course, is a Hollywood blockbuster, but statistics aren't kind to us. Over here, 1 in 5 New Zealanders are apparently bullied. That's a pretty nasty statistic. It's one of the worst worldwide. And although bullies come in all different shapes and sizes, what we know is this. We know that, in fact, 72% of bullies are, in fact, the bully boss. So here's what I know. Here we are trying to desperately rid schoolyard bullying and cyberbullying and all that stuff and looking at solutions. And they're growing up and they're hanging out in our organisations. Bullying kills business. Rant number 2, then there are the blamers. Now these are the ones where nothing is ever their fault. Yeah, does anyone know what I'm talking about here? These are the ones that are too busy blaming and whinging and bitching and moaning and trying to point the finger at everyone else versus actually looking at what their job is and focusing on a solution. Let me take you back a moment to about a decade ago, New York City, where there was 2 very overweight New York teenagers who decided to take Ronald McDonald to court. Remember this case? Claiming that McDonald's was the sole cause of their fatness and their health issues. Now, I was a senior executive at Macca's at the time in Australia, and this did our heads in. Talk about entitlement culture, right? These kids were fat because they chose to eat too much. But they lived in a society that said it was okay to sue, although unsuccessfully. Now, in psychology, these teenagers' behaviour is known as self-serving bias. It's what us humans do to protect ourselves, right? So when everything's going well, great, I'll take the credit for that. But the moment things don't go to plan, well, we kind of shove the, point the finger at everybody else and rather than actually focusing about our role and also focusing on a solution. Now, so what I'd love us to do is get our best blamer face. It looks something like this. So if there's anyone with Botox in the room, you might struggle with this, but let's just still try it. So we get our fingers pointing. Let's get our fingers pointing. We're about to turn to our conference buddy. Let our get best blamer faces on. I want you to turn to your conference buddy and say, it's all your fault. It's all your fault. Get your best blaming face on. It's all your fault. It's all your fault. Now, whilst we've got our fingers pointing, take a moment, folks. Take a moment and look down and always remember, every time you point the finger, there's 3 fingers pointing back at you. Very good. And finally, there are the bludgers. Now, these are what I like to call the thieves of our organisations. They may not be stealing in the traditional sense, but they're stealing energy, they're stealing time, they're stealing money in the form of wasted salary as they fail to do what they're paid to do. Now, us Aussies, we get pretty criticised as being the Aussie bludger. Yeah? Here's what I'm talking about.
What are you doing this weekend? I'm putting up a retaining wall. Do it yourself? No, I'm going to get some broken. Oh, come on, mate, do it yourself. She's a pretty big job. Oh, you'll be right. You reckon? We can knock it over in half a day. Yeah, get a couple mates around. Hey, Jonesy! Huh? Give us a hammer for job Saturday. Mate, you're dreaming. Aussies. No surprises there.
DIY. It's in our DNA.
Yes. We've got to pay that one right to the Aussies in the room. But here's the thing. You combine these 3 toxic behaviours and they really act as the drag factor. And, in a fabulous book that is available today for purchase, that was written by my husband's wife, we explore the extent that these behaviours have, not only on ourselves, because we know the effect it has on ourselves personally, but the actual broader economy. I mean, you'd be astounded. In Australia, absenteeism costs $7 billion to the economy. Bullying, anywhere between 6 and 36 billion. Then Ernst & Young believe that 3.5 million Aussies are unproductive, which cost in wages alone $41 billion. And you come across the ditch and it's not that much better, yeah? Statistics show that there are 1.3 billion work absences days over here, which cost your economy 1.3 billion, and having a poor workplace culture and crappy leadership equates to $2.6 billion. And all this focus on employee engagement over the last 10 to 15 years, and where's it got us? You just have to look at the Gallup research, right? 24% of Aussies and New Zealanders apparently love their jobs. We've probably got most of them in the room here, yeah? And if that statistic isn't depressing enough, then we've got the other end of the scale, yeah? And that's the actively disengaged. You know these ones? These are the ones that think bad thoughts, but they actually act on them. They hate their boss, they don't really like their organisation, they think about quitting daily, but the problem is they don't, do they? And unfortunately, 1 in 4 Aussies and New Zealanders fit this description, 16%. And then you've got the 60% in the middle. They don't love their job, they don't hate their job, they rock up, they kind of sleepwalk through the day, but they're all paid to do a job and they're ripping off their organisation. Enough's enough. Now, I love shopping. Anyone else in the room love shopping? I particularly love shoe shopping, but unfortunately, I'm embarrassed to say I actually even enjoy grocery shopping. Yes. And there was this one incident where I get to the checkout. My 4-year-old daughter at the time was in the trolley. So I get to the checkout, trolley full of groceries, yeah? And then I get greeted by this girl at the checkout. And anyway, we're there for a couple of minutes and sure enough, not one word. And normally now you can probably get a bit of a glimpse. I actually love having a bit of a chit chat. So normally I would have engaged in a bit of a chit chat, but I thought to myself, you know what? This is going to be a little experiment to me. I'm going to see how long it's going to take this girl to actually look at me. Sure enough, as she slowly and apathetically scanned each item, bip, 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 nothing. Not even a little hint of eye contact. And then sure enough, my gorgeous little daughter at the time, Mackenzie, was in the trolley, really actively helping me put all the groceries onto the conveyor belt. And she yells out innocently, but if we all know children, very loudly at the time, and she looks up and she says, "Mum, what's wrong with that girl?" And you can imagine, it's a packed shopping centre. I just wanted to shrivel up into a little ball and pretend that didn't happen. But in retrospect, I kind of thought about it and thought, you know what, she's right. If a 4-year-old can tell by the energy and the enthusiasm or not that this checkout girl was checked out, what do you think the rest of us think? If the 4-year-old can tell that it's not okay, why are we accepting it as okay in our organisations? Because it's just not. But here's the thing, I reckon we sometimes, as leaders, have a lot to answer for. Let me explain. I think sometimes as leaders or supportive teammates, we give way too much attention, or we even reward the very behaviours that we don't want more of. Now, I live at the beach in Sydney, and and I went to your beaches here when I was over here, and you know what it's like when you're at the beach, and you've got all these little seagulls coming around, and what do you do what happens if you throw a chip to a hungry seagull to kind of get rid of them? Oh my God, you get swarmed, right, by all their friends. So you're trying to get rid of them. And in fact, by throwing that chip, you get swarmed. And here's the thing, sometimes by leaders, listening to the whinging, bitching, moaning of their teams because they don't want to have that hard conversation. Sometimes by leaders rewarding the bully that gets the outcome, but we don't actually look at the behaviour. By doing that versus actually having that hard chat, we're actually feeding and fueling the bullies, blamers and bludgers. And before we know it, they reign supreme. So as a leader, here's what we've got to do. We've got to have the guts to stop feeding the birds. And I don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm surrounded by these toxic kind of contagious behaviours, I wish for a split second I could morph into Adam Sandler. Now, let me explain. Has anyone seen the movie Click? It's definitely not his best movie. In fact, it's very average, but it's no Wedding Singer. But in this movie, Adam Sandler plays this guy where he has a remote control and he has the ability to click, pause his life and do like shit in that time that he wishes he could do in real life, but he really can't. And sometimes when I'm around these crappy behaviours, this is what I wish I could do.
Whoa, cowboy. I said land the Watsahita account, you'll get promoted. I didn't mean right this second.
But I already told my wife, sir. I spent money I don't have. To do these documents, it's gonna take me months.
And you better get started. Wow, I just got a big headache.
All right, so slightly inappropriate, and Adam Sandler does crazy and angry better than anyone. But do I have a tool for you that can help you in this moment when we need to interrupt thinking, when we need to just get that little kind of, metaphorical slap, even if we're indulging in those behaviours ourselves, or if our teams are kind of whinging, bitching and moaning. Introducing, ladies and gentlemen, your very own slapper. Now, my colleagues on the tables have this very own slapper. You may know it as a clapper. It is now known as a slapper. This little tool comes in handy for all sorts of things. Yeah? When you find yourself indulging in these toxic behaviours, as we sometimes do, you give yourself a little slap, yeah? If someone in one of your classes, is just being the naysayer, you give them a little slap, yeah? And it serves as a trigger to actually stop indulging in some of those behaviours. So here's what I'd love us to do, folks. I'd love us to get our slappers, because here's the thing, right? It's probably the only time you can be called a slapper and be proud, so let's do it. Let's get our slappers in our hands. Let's turn to our conference buddy, and on the count of 3, we're going to repeat after me. You're going to say, I'm a slapper and I'm proud. Are we ready? 1, 2, 3. I'm a slapper and I'm proud. Very good, very good. But in all seriousness, you combine these 3 toxic behaviours together, they are certainly the drag factor, and they will limit your ability to perform, to be innovative, and definitely to be productive, yeah? Now, whilst many organisations are busy, investing in restructures after restructure, the best organisations that I see happening around the place are actually investing in leadership cultures. Yeah, and this is where leadership is upside down. It's where they instill the notion that actually it's everybody's responsibility to lead. Now, obviously, it's not everyone's going to get the corner office and the title and the budget and the people to manage. But when we talk about everyone leading, it's instilling this notion is that we all can lead ourselves, lead our customers, and lead our business to the outcomes we're after. And an organisation that does this brilliantly, and I know on-brand partners have been over and actually spent some time with Zappos.com. Does everyone know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about Zappos.com? Zappos.com, however you pronounce it. Brilliant organisation, and ironically, this organisation has become more famous for its focus on people and culture than it has actually thought it does. It was traditionally an online retailer that, was shoes, and then it's turned into lots of stuff. Now, this organisation gives so much ownership to their teams to drive their business and it instills this notion of everyone leads within that organisation. There's lots of great stories. I mean, it's a call centre ultimately. And how many call centres do you know where there's no scripts, no timelines? There's a story that goes that one call apparently went for 6 hours to get to the customer's outcome. No, it's not a pizza joint, but there is a story that the CEO, Tony Shea, apparently was out drinking one night with one of the suppliers, and they were hungry. They were on the piss and they got a bit hungry, and he's like, well, why don't you ring the Zappos, hotline and see if they can tell us where the local pizza joints are, 12 o'clock at night. You can imagine this, right? So the guy goes, really? He's like, yeah, why don't you ring him? So sure enough, the supplier rings the hotline and he's asked the guy on the other end where the local pizza joints are. Now, this guy didn't go, piss off, mate, it's not my job to do it, which is probably what we do in Australia. He's just gone, okay, interesting. He knows his job is to make his customer happy, regardless of what that is. So a couple of minutes later, he rings back with the 5 closest pizza joints. That's ownership. That's doing whatever it takes to get the job done, yeah? What I love about Zappos.com as well is after a 4-week induction period, they actually offer every employee $4,000 to quit, yeah? Every employee, right? Yep, good, we've invested in you now, here's $4,000 off you go, if you want. How many people do you reckon take that offer up, percentage-wise? 2%. They estimate 2%. So in other words, those 2% who stay are expected to lead themselves, to lead their customer, to make their customer happy. They're all about delivering happiness. It's an amazing case study. So when organisations can harness the leadership in all of us, where we're expected to take responsibility like a leader, think like a leader, act like a leader, make choice like a leader and represent the brand like a leader, that's when great stuff happens. So if the notion or the vision is that everyone leads, I guess the strategy for that is through driving ownership within ourselves first, but then our teams. And the way I see it, there's 3 main elements to driving ownership, and this is where we come in. The first is that every team member, including ourselves, we've got to be ready for it. We've got to have the awareness, because people don't know what they don't know. Yeah, they've got to have the capability and the skill set to be able to do their job. Our teams need to be willing to do it. And they've got to have the internal motivation. So when I hear people say, oh, my role as a leader is to motivate my team, I say, what a load of crap. And they go, what? But you're a HR manager, you can't say that. Because here's the thing, I actually have a fundamental belief that we can't motivate someone who doesn't want to be motivated. We can't make someone happy who doesn't want to be made happy, yeah? So our role is not to motivate as a leader, our role is to inspire action. And later on, I want you guys to have a talk about, well, what does that mean? How can we do that within our teams? And finally, and probably most critically for you guys in the room, they've got to be enabled to act. We've heard this throughout the day. You can have the most ready and willing person who then actually can't act because of people or processes that get in the way. So our role as leaders in this century is to actually enable our teams so that they can step up and perform. So as we get into our activities later, this is the stuff I want you talking about. What's our role? How can we actually, what are some of the actions we can do to get this happening? It's not okay that the bullies, blamers and bludgers acted this drag factor and are pulling down our performance and all the people around them. It's just not okay. Now, whilst we can't go back in the past, we can certainly have the courage to muster up a better future, and the future starts with us. Thank you very much, everybody. Love to speak to you later. Enjoy the rest of the conference.